Morning, and welcome to the Festival of Place Bite Size in association with You and I Think. I'm Christine Murray. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Developer and the director of the Festival of Place. We're a small independent company. We run a podcast and a website. We make a magazine, and we host the annual Festival of Place, which is taking place on the 13th of November this year, with the ambition of bringing people together to talk about challenging issues facing the spaces between the buildings and the cities and the places that we make. And now we're doing these Festival of Place Bite Size. These are taster events of the main annual event. And You and I, the developer we're partnering on this event with, also runs a series of events called You and I Think. So this was an opportunity of us with our shared ambition of unpicking really how to develop places that thrive that we're putting on this event today. Our journalism, podcasts, and events like this are free. If you like what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/thedeveloperuk. And check out the Festival of Place, which is festivalofplace.co.uk. It normally takes place in July, but for obvious reasons, it's been moved to November. Our next Bite Size event is on the 16th of June, and that's with Nick Tyler from UCL on physical distancing and sociality or sociality. I'm not even sure how to say that. Sociality? Sociality. Anyway, I'll find out on the 16th of June. And this morning, though, we're going to be talking about art in urban space with Morag Myerscough, who's just restarting her computer and going to be signing in. And I think the context for this talk, I mean, we've talked about how at this time people have been painting handmade rainbows to put in their windows. There have been murals popping up and posters in the city thanking the NHS. We're using art as a kind of collective expression. As we might have commemorated a battle, we're using art to tell a shared story about this time and our experiences. But art has also long been used as a part of property development, such as Henry Moore's sculpture in Harlow Newtown, to signify a kind of utopian dream. And more recently, art is often used on meanwhile uses on development sites to tell a sometimes controversial but interesting story about a place's past and its future, and also as a totem to bring people together in a place that is changing. So it's my pleasure to be putting on this morning's event with Morag, who's just getting her technology sorted out. But I'm going to hand over to Martin Evans, creative director of You and I, who's going to be doing this morning's introduction and talking about why this topic is interested. After Morag's talk, we're going to have a Q&A, but you can start putting your questions in. There's a Q&A tag at the bottom of your screen, and there's an optional networking chat after the event.
Thanks for coming, and thank you, Christine. Brilliant. Thank you for that introduction. So the reason that I asked Morag if she would come and talk to us this morning is really very simple. That I think my company has a reputation for doing this kind of stuff quite well. All right, so let's keep hoping. So the reason that I asked Morag to come and talk is because we have known each other for a very long time, probably 25 years, Morag, something like that. And we've worked together a lot. We started working together, and I think that what I'm very happy.
Very young.
Well, we both were. I had some hair then, I think. What made me very happy about my working relationship with Morag is that our working relationship has sort of developed along with Morag's development as an artist, and to get her to the place where she is now in the world with the reputation that she has and the body of work that she has produced. We started working together when Morag was running a design studio, and our first work together was graphic design for property projects that we were doing at my company, which was then called Cathedral Group. But I knew right from the very beginning that the way that we talked about the work that Morag did for us and the way that she helped us to shape and talk about our scheme. Oh, hello. The way that Morag talked about our work and helped us to shape it was clearly going to always be more than just producing some graphic design. Sometimes it was kind of frustrating because I'd say, I'd like to do this. And the first thing Morag would say is, why? No, you don't want to do that. You need to do this. And I'd say, listen, who's the client? But then, of course, infuriatingly, she would always be right. And what she always encouraged me to do, and my colleagues, particularly Richard Upton, my colleague, the two of us, when she was working closely with us, was to just think more about what we were doing, never to just accept face value for what we were doing, and always dig deeper and always work harder and look harder at the places where we were working and look harder at the schemes we were doing and try to understand them and the people who are going to use them. And that's a valuable lesson that I learned from Morag very, very early on in our work together. What we then started to do is, as our schemes got bigger, the need to engage with them early on became more important. As I was just saying with Christine earlier while Morag was logging in, our larger schemes sit empty for a long time typically. We probably have them for 2, sometimes 3 years before we would ever stick a spade in the ground. And that's the time at which we're doing our design work and our planning consents. It's crazy to imagine that those spaces, if it is technically possible to use them, i.e. they're not dangerous or difficult, crazy to leave them locked up and unused. But of course, if you're going to open the gates, you have to make them accessible and easy to use and engaging. And your object in doing that is to try to have people think differently about the place. Try to imagine that it's not this dirty, filthy, difficult, unused, closed place, but a place that's going to be open and welcoming and inviting and interesting, and places where people will live and places where people will work and where they will eat food and drink and enjoy themselves. That's hard when you've got some, in like we have at the moment in Manchester, some 25 acres of miserable ex-industrial site where really the only reason you would go there is either to be attacked or to buy sex or drugs. That might sound quite exciting to somebody, but some people, but not to most people. And so to try to turn those places around and turn the perception of those places around is hard. And there's only really one way you can do it, and that's make them safe and make them beautiful and make them attractive and make them inviting. And do it cheaply and quickly. And when I say cheaply, I mean relatively cheaply, you know, not spend the millions of pounds that it takes to build buildings. And so the way that Morag's work developed in the years that we were working together was to be able to answer that need, to create installations and interventions in places that invited people in and made them feel something, made them feel different. And that is, for me, right at the heart, and I hope what Morag's going to talk to us about this morning, right at the heart of what has characterized our work together, is that it's her ability as an artist to change the nature of place quickly and very dramatically, to make people feel something different. And you know what? It's priceless. It's absolutely priceless. We've done it many times together, all those times hugely successfully. It's been you know, boringly award-winning, but most importantly, it's been engaging. It's been about inviting people in. The projects that we've worked on together have always been planned to have much shorter lives than they've ended up having, because they've been so successful that they've lasted much longer. We built a cafe in Greenwich on the site that's now completely developed just by Greenwich High Street Station. It's beautiful, beautiful cafe. We built it in 10 days, Morag, I think, to put it up.
Yeah, I think it was
a little bit longer than that
3 weeks, really.
design,
yeah,
but the actual construction from beginning to end was days. And that thing stayed open for nearly 3 years. It was meant to be there for 6 or 8 months, but it was so successful and it became such a beloved part of the fabric of the community that we started building around it rather than demolishing it and building in its place. We changed the process of construction in order to keep it there as long as possible. So that's all I want to say, really, is that this is our work. My work with Morag is so much more than working with an artist to create some images to decorate a place. That's about as far away from the collaborative work we've done together as can possibly be. It is right at the other end of that spectrum. It's about ingraining yourself in a place and changing it in order to engage with people. So that's me done. Morag, over to you and Elvis.
Okay. Oh, okay. Oops. I've never done a talk with a dog on my lap. Okay. I'm going.
Put him on the floor.
I'm going to. Am I? No, he likes being there. I will put him on the floor, but I quite like to. Okay. I just wanted to start with this statement because it's something that I feel really strongly about. That I think we spend our lives really. We look at loads of things, but do we actually really see what they're about? And it's when you start really seeing things, you start investigating about things, you find other things, and you actually start understanding why they're there in the first place. So I found out, and actually only relatively recently, that I knew that my great grandfather was illegitimate. His mother was from a single mother, and the Myerscough names comes through the mother. But I didn't know that he was actually born in the workhouse in Farringdon Road. And I looked that up, and that was a pretty grim place to have been born. And his mother, Charlotte, was from quite a good family, but because she'd become pregnant and she didn't have a husband, she was put into the workhouse. So this was my great grandfather, and he joined the circus, and then he met Anne, who came from a very good German and Polish family, but had run away from the circus as well. And the only thing that they wanted that they could find her to do, next slide please, was start the slide, press the button.
Oh, no.
So you should just be able to go on to the next one, yeah. Yeah. And so the only thing they could find her to do was to become a high diver. And I always thought that was a trapeze artist. And still I watched this film, The Caravan or something. And actually she would dive into a tiny pool of water twice a day, every day. So if that wasn't a brave woman, she was pretty brave. And I think so to come from that stock must be quite good. Anyway, next slide. But years later, Charlotte, the mother who'd stayed in London, she found her son because she'd lost him, and she got him to come back to London. And she'd inherited from her, she was a mistress to somebody, and she inherited these houses. And so she put her son in these houses, and that's where my family have lived since the beginning of the 20th century. And at that time, when everybody lived there, they were all tenanted. It's in Holloway, in the Nag's Head near Finsbury Park. And it was pretty grim. And it was even grim when I was there. My dad stayed there during the war, and it was bombed, and it was, it's not, they weren't the single houses as they are now. And then my grandfather was sort of had a bit of arranged marriage with the woman on the top, who's my French grandmother, and she came over to London, and she was put in this really hideous place to live. And she came from this very good French family. My great grandfather was a painter and a salon painter, and she transformed her living. She wanted to live an elegant life. So the room that she's standing in is the room in one of those terraced houses that she got all her family to make work for her. And she transformed that space so that when she came home at night, she had this escapist, this elegant place where she actually really wanted to live. And that has really stayed with me for a long time, the way that people can make a place that can actually be what they believe they want it to be, even though the circumstances are different. Next slide. And my grandmother worked for Hartnell's. She made hats, and she really wanted her sons to do well. My grandfather, he had been brought up in the circus, and he went and worked on the Queen Mary. He was a violin player, and he worked on the Queen Mary. And so he wasn't around much. But she was determined her sons were going to do something. And my dad and my uncle became musicians. And my dad was a viola player, and he was a classical musician and session musician. And my uncle won the Festival of Britain for music prize for violin. And I think I've always liked condensed type, because you can see my dad's name. That was his first Wigmore Hall performance. So we lived in this very interesting house where there were loads of things going on. And partly also because my dad met by chance in Aberdeen when he was with the Royal Ballet. My mother, who was Scottish, and she was teaching textiles. And she was just amazing person to have as a mother. If we can go to the next one. So you can see anyway on that previous picture, actually, my mum I liked making things with my mum, and my dad used to practice, and I always thought that was a very lonely thing to do, to sit in a room on your own. So I can't play an instrument, and also I can't speak French. But we lived in this house. It was very, very different to what was going on in Holloway at the time. And I felt very like an outsider at school. I felt I never told anybody about how our house was at home. You know, we never had people round to our house because I didn't really fit in. And I wanted to speak Cockney because everybody spoke Cockney, and children are like that, aren't they? They want to feel like they belong in a place. And I knew I belonged at home, but I didn't feel that I belonged in what was around me. So I spent a long time searching for that. And the next slide is just a fun slide. My mum gave us our spaceship, and me and Shauna, when we were little, we used to also go away to all our different planets, to our different fantasy lands. And next. So for me, I spent many, many years, and I think it was also about conforming to establishment, expectations of me. It took me really, really long time to realize what actually I wanted to do, and how I could, and where I found my place. Next slide. And actually, weirdly, even though this is a physical building, this was the place where I found belonging, which is where I'm sitting now. It wasn't for me about after leaving home and everything, and it wasn't for me about children. It wasn't about trying to make a nest or whatever. It was about actually just having the space. I was a middle child, and I never had any of my own space really. In our house, we only lived on 2 floors, and it was quite crammed, everything. And I just wanted to have a place where I could make and do everything that I ever wanted, I ever could do. And I found this place. And then that moment I walked in that door, I felt that this is it. This is what I've been looking for all this time. And I managed, from doing the work that I'd been doing for all those years, managed to buy it. Next, please. And this is just to show you the expression in my house. And next, so upstairs I live, and downstairs, next slide, is my studio. And it just made me feel, there is this something when you feel like suddenly there's this moment in time, if you feel like you've connected, and it can happen to you at any point in your life, it has a different feeling inside. Because I felt that feeling, I then have been on a mission to work out, how do you make places, how do you make work, how do you do things that people can connect to? How can they have that? How can you do that? So next one. Oh, this is just to show you that this is my old dog, that I work on my own. I also work with Luke. And then in my studio, next slide, Luke Morgan, he works with me and lives with me. And then sometimes in my studio, I bring lots and lots of people in, and people get involved in projects, which is a very important thing, and I'll talk more about later. Next slide. It's like you can play them, and it's okay because it's a bit slow. Just go to the next. So do a few presses. And then we come to 2012, which Martin mentioned. And I had moved into that house in 2005. So I had been thinking quite a long time of how I wanted to do work and what I wanted to do work. But sometimes you can't always make those opportunities happen. People do have to sort of believe in you and give you an opportunity, because I don't own a piece of ground that I can just build a structure in. There needs to be people who believe in you, and Martin and Richard believed in me up until the day before I hadn't given a design, and I was given this space. And it was what I've been waiting for all these years, for years and years. I mean, I left the Royal College in '88, so it's been a very long time for this to happen. And then when I had that opportunity, I was absolutely scared and I couldn't do it. And Martin and Richard were sort of going, more like, when are we going to see that design? Because they did give me a little time to design. When are we going to see it? And I was like, oh. And then finally I went to site and Mitchell was like, if you don't give me that design and soon. So I went home that evening and I'd been working with Len Sizet on a permanent poem that was going to be installed on the same site. And I went home and I was absolutely petrified about, I had to get this thing out of me. I had something in me, but I didn't know how to get it out. And I read this tweet that particular day by Len, and it just triggered something in my mind. And literally, I just made that model that evening. I made it. It just triggered it. I made this thing. And then at the end of it, I thought, yeah, this is it. And the next day I took it round to Martin and Richard, and they said, yes, build it, Morag. Of course, I'd never built anything. I was like, oh my God, I've got to build it now. So then we had to build it. And it was brilliant, and it was the making of me. And it was just that trigger that managed to get me to this other place. And then, your next slide. I thought I was doing slides.
No, that's me.
That's you. and then I realized that I mean, I had worked on the tube train before, but this was a different thing. This was a whole structure completely done by me, completely yeah, I can't really describe it. And it completely changed my way of working and the possibilities. But most importantly, I realized I would go and sit in there and understand how people use the space, what was right about it, what was wrong about it, how we could do things better. And I would learn from the fact that I was able to start understanding how I could make this, make it a place that could develop my ideas as well. And Martin can tell you, there were performances, it was run by young people, and it really did change the sort of community in that area for a period of time.
I was going to say, Morag, as well, that you can see that it's a little amphitheatre. That wasn't intentional. It was a hole in the ground. The building that we had demolished where this sits had a basement where you can see where the ground was, where the wall was painted white. And so this is Morag responding to what she was given, which is basically a hole in the ground, and attempting to create a kind of cocoon-like place that felt warm. I mean, you can't, if you turned around and looked the other way, you'd see that this is actually on a very busy street. Just literally the left-hand side of this picture is Greenwich High Road, and it's noisy and busy with traffic. But sitting down in this little dip here was incredibly peaceful. And so taking the hole in the ground and responding to it with underneath those bleacher seats is simply scaffolding. So it's the cheapest, easiest thing to do. But physically turning that into that, so it's not, so what I'm trying to say, interrupting more rudely, is that this is not just about putting a decorative item in the middle of this thing. It is about changing that place and using it to create a place where people feel happy.
Absolutely. And also I think the temporariness, using the scaffolding, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well later, is very, very important to me. And I think it's even more key now than when we realized at the time when we did this in 2012, is we shouldn't throw things away. What's great about using scaffolding is it is part of a big system. It's hired, it's put back into that system. The panels, actually, I think you kept some of the panels. I still have quite a few of the panels as well, because I will not throw things away after these temporary projects. And I've kept a certain amount of things to be able to build something else with them. And I think it's really important that temporary projects don't use lots of materials and then are just thrown, you know, destroyed. I mean, those shipping containers were reused for years and years and years, weren't they? And then sold.
Yeah, I think we sold them.
They were given to an art. You gave them to somebody.
Did
I think
we?
who wanted them.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. So, you know, it's very, very important that all those materials are not used and thrown away. Next, sorry, I keep on thinking I'm in control. I'm not in control. Okay, United by Pattern. So I think this was a very, very key project about understanding a place that I didn't know very well. So if you go to the next project, I was asked to be a part of this festival, Stierbicke Herbst, in Graz in Austria. And if you've been to Austria, it is a very if you've been to Graz, it is a very particular place. It's got the big Peter Cook building there. And there is a massive divide between cultures. And this was called the People's Park, but basically and this was a socialist workers building, but the park was used it was meant to be the park for the people, but it was just used by people taking drugs, selling drugs. And the idea of this project was called Open Doors and bringing a rival zone. And it was about trying to, instead of this arts festival that was very advanced work and that everybody didn't engage with, it was about putting a piece out into the community and everybody could be part of. So next, please. So I worked with the gallery. But one of the biggest things is that I worked with the communities. If you press, you can see the people doing their stickers. I think press twice. And there's the other one. And I really wanted to get really in with work with the community. I worked with 9 different communities. And because obviously I don't speak the language, doing workshops with pattern is fine, because we're united by pattern. We can just get on with it. And these guys on the right, they were funny. They were a youth club, and they were really suspicious of me doing this project, but they absolutely loved it. And if you go to the next slide, next image, why do we call them slides? And go to the next one.
Because we're over 40, Morag, that's why.
If you go to the next one, that's just showing a translation. So then what I did is I take the sketches by the groups, and then I draw them up in Illustrator, and I then make them into these patterns, and I keep them as close to the original drawings as possible, the original workshop drawings. But people love it to see their work has been worked up in this way. And then we filled the streets of Graz with these banners by everybody, and they knew that they were their pieces of work, and that was a really, really important part of the project. Next slide, next image. And this was the actual structure. So the whole idea of this, there were open doors. There wasn't one door you went in and one door you went out. Everybody could come in and flow in and out. And we closed off this area. If you go to the next one. And then we made this space for everybody to come in, and then all the different cultural groups for a few days, I think this was up for like 3 months, would make food for everybody. And then they did a cookbook at the end, and everybody shared music and food, and they started understanding what everybody's different cultures were about, and they joined together. And it was just a really amazing project to bring people together. And I think even though it's only temporary, it was a beginning. It started the conversation. It started the dialogue. It wasn't meant to be there forever. It was about just making those connections with people so that people felt that they were part of something that they hadn't been part of before. The next one. Oh yeah, don't worry, we won't play they're all the little playing videos. Oh, let's go to the next one. And on a very little place, the place that I love the most in London is the Curve, the Dalston Curve Garden. It is a magical, beautiful place. And when I was asked to do a little, they had a little stage, and then there was arts kickers who do these awards for all the community, and they wanted to do a celebration. They said, Morag, will you help make this stage? And we made, all the community got involved and made the stage. And it didn't cost anything, but it brought everybody together. And it was just so fantastic to be part of that, and to have been asked to be part of that particular place. I mean, that if there's anywhere where an amazing, you know, a temporary, supposedly temporary, but hopefully it will always be permanent, has brought the community together, is the Dalston Cove Garden. And Joe did it. You know, you work with Joe a lot.
Jo Gibbons, yeah.
Joe Gibbons, amazing woman. I absolutely love everything she does. Next, please. So Finding Magic, next, please. So this is a really, this project really moved me so much to be involved in it. It was South London Gallery, and this was Sue Garden Estates before Grenfell, where you know, tragically, that people were told to stay in their flats, and then they died in their flats, and the community was broken, really, really broken, and it was really hard to bring everybody together. And South London Gallery were really embedded in the community, and they set up a little art workshop for the kids in those estates. There was sometimes there used to be old shops, but they're not shops anymore. You know, they were closed down. They put the art shop, the workshop in there, and they worked with the kids. The kids could come in, and I just wanted to play you, and the next one is just a little video. So what I did, I was asked, what happened is this, don't play it yet, I'll just tell you in a second. In that building, underneath that building, to give back to the community, they built on the ground floor, they put in the workshop for the kids as a permanent space. But it was all, you know, they'd had this really, well, you'll see in the film, they had this really fun place, and now they had this quite austere place. And South London Gallery asked me to be the first artist to come and make that place for the children to use to do their work. And so I was the first artist involved. And so I went about it in this way, because it is really important that it's not about me in these projects. It's about enabling things to happen, to make things happen for the people who it's for, and then they own it, and it belongs to them, and it's part of their everyday. So it's a little video, hopefully it'll run. If it doesn't run for any reason, go on to South London Gallery website, and you will see all that, you will be able to see this video and also the other stuff they're doing. So if you press the next. It should have sound. Is the sound coming? Maybe no sound. Oh, well, I can talk through it. That's me. I've lost a bit of weight. So this was the opening of the workshop, and you can see the space, and we can't really, you can move it on a bit. So what I did with the young people is I showed them all different studios, and they chose things that they wanted. They chose the same some of the work benches that I have in my studio, and so we bought them for them. And so this was their old art place, which they loved. You know, it was just fun. They could do whatever they wanted in it.
Marek, are you speaking right now?
No, I'm not speaking right now.
Just checking, we hadn't lost you. I think people are wondering if the videos are supposed to be silent. They are.
No, I think, they're meant to have sound. It's meant to have sound.
Can they not hear the sound?
No, they can't.
Sorry, is the sound not working on the Zoom?
Yeah,
No, that's why I was talking over it,
sorry,
Martin.
I'm so sorry, Maura.
Anyway.
Do you want me to keep playing it?
No, it's okay. If we didn't, okay, so disaster. Okay.
No, but if you talk, if the sound doesn't work, talk over and explain it.
Martin, apparently you should have a setting that says share video sound as well as audio. Sorry, share video sound as well as video. Is that in a Zoom setting? I'm asking our participants who are... Martin, click on your screen share button. I love you, Charlotte Hastings, and it's an option. Your share screen button, and it's an option. View options. It's not my option. I think
mine
it's
neither.
yours.
Video settings there.
On the bottom bar.
On your bottom low bar.
Oh yeah. Go to your microphone bar.
Where, down here?
On your Zoom screen.
I don't have a Zoom screen. I've just got a tiny little bar across the top because I'm sharing.
Okay, stop.
Should we move on from this one and I can just sum
Sorry,
it
I
up
can't work out how to do that.
Okay.
I'm going to switch to audio settings, maybe that.
Okay, yes, we can try to share it later with sound.
Yeah, let's do that.
Persist.
And I'll just finish off a little bit. If we go back to just the before we go to there. But with that project, what was really, really important about it is it's about engaging children in art and understanding also that they can get careers from being in it, and it isn't just a plaything that there isn't any future. And what I wanted to do was take the work that I did with the young people in the workshop and make it real. So I made fabrics, I made curtains, I put artworks on the wall, all from their work. And it was fantastic. The parents change in attitude to the fact that these children were not just there to play and use some time up, but they were actually learning, and art was important. And it was really important also that the little kids come, and what South London Gallery are really trying to do is transition the teenagers also, so that people will carry on doing art and they can see a future in it. And it was just very, very important, and it was so fascinating, because the kids at first were a bit suspicious of me. They weren't sure, who I was and everything, and you had to earn people's trust, and that's a very, very important thing to do. You've got to try and work out why and how to work with people, and then find a way that works for you, and then the results will be not something that when I went into that project, I had no idea what we were going to come out at the end of it, and at the end of it I was really pleased with the results. So I think it's really important if you can watch the film, because you can see also the children's reactions to what they were doing, which was really lovely. And it's called the Club Under My House, I think it is. The kids came up with, I work with poets often, and so I worked with a poet and they worked with the kids and they did rap songs, and it was really wonderful. Anyway, next. Okay, we make belonging. Okay, so because I'm obviously, I explained to you earlier about understanding belonging. So then I thought, well, actually, why skirt around the subject? Why not actually do a project that was really absolutely about belonging? And I was brought up on black and white movies, and I really love Top Hat. I watched it recently, it was really quite boring, but I really love this scene. So if you press it, and it's the scene in Top Hat when they're dancing in a bandstand. And this would have sound as well, but don't worry.
It's got lovely music.
Yeah. Da 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 da. It's that song. Da 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 da. Okay, that's a bit high. Okay, so next image.
Isn't it a lovely day to get caught in the rain? I believe it's called.
That's it. Yeah. And I've been fascinated with looking at bandstands. The reason I like bandstands is because they are a public place. Anybody can go to, anybody can join in. When they're empty, you can dance on them, as shown there. And I just wanted to make that structure. And I tried very hard with you and I to make the structure. As you can see, these are my models on the lower bit, but that didn't happen. So my dream of doing a bandstand was took a long time. If we go to the next one. And I went to Ditchling, and at the time, the director of Ditchling Museum of Art in down in Sussex, and I went to Ditchling, that I was invited there, which is, you can see the picture of it, Museum of Art and Design and Craft and Design. And I went, and they said to me, what do you want to do? What's the thing you've always wanted to do? And I said, I want to make a belonging bandstand. And they said to me, Morag, well, I think this will work really well, because we're going to do a project we're going to put an exhibition on of Sister Karita Kent's work. And if you don't know her work, you should look at it and you should read about her. Because I thought, oh, fantastic, I know Karita Kent's work, I really love it. But that was an occasion where I had only looked at her work and maybe I hadn't really seen it. So when they said to me that I was going to join up with her, I thought, oh, okay, I better do a little bit more research. Next slide. And I read all the books that people had written about her until I read this book that she had written with one of her ex-students. And it is phenomenal. Honestly, I really recommend this book to everybody. It is about everybody being an artist. She was a teacher. You can look her up at the same time as Eames in Los Angeles. And she eventually left the Catholic Church because they didn't agree with her if you read letters, and she didn't agree with what was going on. But for a long period of time, well, basically she was an educator and a radical, and she was an amazing woman. And if you read this book, she has lots of assignments in it. And what I realized from reading this book, that we were so much more similar thinking than I'd ever imagined in my life. And maybe that was because I was taught by people maybe who thought similar to her. I don't really know. So next slide, next image. And this was just one of her, something from the book. And she talked a lot about thinking about being a child, about remembering, you know, working through things, playing, that everybody can do art, and it's really, really powerful. Next, please. So I wanted again to do workshops to do this belonging bandstand, because I truly wanted to find out what did belonging mean to people. How can we make this piece of work that really did connect with people? So I took some of the assignments from Karita Kent's book and molded them together with my own type of assignments. And we did 9 different workshops with loads of community groups. Next, please. Have we lost Martin?
No, I'm here.
Oh, no. Oh, right, okay. Yeah, you can just go to the next one, because we're never gonna have talks. And so what happened is we did all these words, and these are the words from the people. They put them together themselves, and then they directed me on how they wanted me to make these. There's a series of placards, how to make these placards. And I drew them up and I sent them to them, and then they told me whether I'd got things right or wrong. So for example, the Time to Grow, that area actually is full of hills, and I had not been to Hangleton. I did a workshop with them, but they did it in Ditchling, so I hadn't actually been to the community that people lived in in that occasion. And they said to me, Morag, that looks like it's flat here, and it's got to have hills. So that corrected me, and I changed everything so that it changed the shape. You can't see my hands moving, but I'm doing round shapes. So if we go to the next one. And then I worked with Brighton University, and they helped me make and paint all the placards for the communities. And it was really brilliant, because the communities wanted me to make the work for them. They wanted their words and their input, but they wanted me to make the work to be a finished, completed thing. And then I painted the rest of the bandstand myself with my own patterns. So if we go to the next one. Oh, this is another Kurita thought. Okay, next one. And this is the bandstand. So what happened, the bandstand had a crown of all the people's, what belonging meant to them. And when it moved to each place, the people's placards moved, each community's placards moved to the front of the bandstand. And so it owned, for the period of time they had it, they owned it, they programmed it, and they did whatever they wanted. It was theirs. Next one. So this is it on Brighton. It was part of Brighton Festival. And it toured at that time. And next one. And then it toured for quite a long time afterwards. But this was the place that was, this again, part Brighton Festival, but this was the place that really was incredible for me, because this bandstand had landed in this housing estate. Behind it is a community centre. But people came out and said to me that because it was outside, because everybody could see it, it drew everybody together, and they all wanted to get involved in it, and they all started communicating and chatting that like they'd never done before. And they were really asking if the bandstand could stay. But in a way, I think it's because I come from a circus family, or I love fun fairs. I think there is the excitement of something not always staying. It's about it coming and then going away, and then hopefully coming again, or coming again in a different form. But what it did again was show the possibilities of how you can bring people together by introducing this structure. Next, and performance, and people's ownership of it, making public. Next. So this was very, very personal. This is another thing where we get back to about doing a joint project with people, about making a place for them, and also a place, and then there was a connection with me. So this was in Aberdeen. My mother had died quite suddenly in 2017, and I got a phone call from Aberdeen, and they said to me, "Oh, Mike, would you like to come and do an installation in our city, the Look Again Festival?" And I was like, "Oh, this is so weird. You know, my mother met my father in Aberdeen, and she just died, and this is and this is really weird." So I thought, well, I've got to do this project. I've got to do this project. And when I went up there, I never thought it was about taking an area in the city, changing people's perception of the area in the city, getting people to link to that area. And it was the Market Cross, which was a meeting place. It was a monument at the end of the high street. And I just thought, I didn't go up there thinking I'd do something about my mum. And then I worked with Joe Gordon, sorry, I've got Joe's second name wrong, sorry. But anyway, I worked with an amazing Doric poet, and she said to me, "Morag, you need to do it about your parents' story, about them meeting. Suddenly my dad was on the ballet tour, saw my mum, got her to come down to London, then they got married, and I should do it about that." And I said, "But this project's not about me." And they said, no, it's about your meeting. And then what we'll do, then we'll work with the community about why they love Aberdeen. So we did this piece of work that had a narrative, a personal story, and other people's personal stories. And it was just, it really sort of gave a depth to the work. And it was quite strange for me to put myself right out there. But I think that it did do that connection with people, and also people connected with me, because obviously I wouldn't exist if my parents hadn't met in Aberdeen. And my mother's Scottish. So next, please. Oh, so this was my mum and dad. It was in the newspaper that my dad got married. My mum got married to my dad in Aberdeen. It was big news. Next. And what was the most amazing, the group of people, the Look Again Festival crew are the most amazing women I have ever met, and with such energy. And I realized that maybe there was a bit more Scottish in me than I thought. And we had very little money, and they just mobilized everybody. And I think about 100 people got involved. Mums and dads got involved, everybody involved. And I went up for a while, and then I had two people who ran it, part of the team, who ran the whole thing, and they painted it, and they painted the whole thing, and you saw what the final thing was. So it was about everybody being involved, and everybody being part of it. And if you go to the next one. And then this was the poem written by the community, which was so long and in Doric that I actually had to write it on site, because I couldn't do lots of small ones. So next one, please. But it was really great because everybody got involved and talked with me about it, and it was interesting. The one round the outside is a story of my mum and dad, written by Joe. Next, please. But what the most important thing again was, for example, a midwife came up to me and she said to me, "Oh, it's so amazing. This is in our city. We really love it. We love the color. We know loads of people involved in it. We want more of this." And that is, if that's all I managed to do, I think that is an amazing thing. It got people talking and they wanted more of it. Next, please. And they felt connected to it. Just show you the scale of it, that we all painted that, the community painted the whole thing. Next, please. And that's the view of it from the back in the Market Cross. And then if you go to the next one, I painted with neon paint, so it was absolutely shone out among all the buildings in Aberdeen, which was a perfect backdrop for me. So next, please. Okay, I think I'm going to skip this one. So just go forward, because we're running out of time. Just go forward with this one. And skip that one. And let's go to this one. Yeah. Making home. So we go to the next one. So I did want to do this because I think that
Stop here.
I think it's
stop at this
yeah,
one?
go to yeah. So should I just speak for 5 more minutes? Is that good?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, is that okay? Okay. So so it's also translating all these things into places where people are involved, but they can't be as involved as maybe when you're working on a big installation. So I got the commission to do these hospital bedrooms at Sheffield Children's Hospital through Kat Powell from Artsfelt Trust. And this was the architect's room, which is very nice and very clean. But it felt, because it was for children, to do something with it. I'd never been allowed in bedrooms before because I'm a bit too bright. So if you go to the next one. And this was what I presented to 20 clinical staff in a meeting up in Sheffield. And they were really nice. But the next day they said to me, they said to the Arts Commissioner that she was really nice, but she's not going to do those bedrooms. They're too much. And so if you go to the next slide. So I thought, actually, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to find a way, because I felt really strongly about this. I felt like I wanted to make, even though they were for children, I didn't want them to be really child's room. Well, I don't have children, so I don't really know what a child's room is totally. I wanted to make a warm place, a place that felt like home, because the parents were going to be there as well. And I wanted to introduce, it's all laminate, but I introduced wood laminate because that softens the room with the color. So I made all these little models and I sent them up to Sheffield, and Kat took them round to the patients and the clinical staff, and they understood what we were trying to do, because it must be really impossible. You're showing on a screen some graphics of a bedroom. How can you translate that into a physical space? So models are really, really important. And you can see 92% of people said yes. And the only concession I had to do was there were 46 bedrooms. I had to make 6 bedrooms have blue hues in it. So when the children were under sedation or were going to come out of something, may have had some drugs that would affect them in a way that the colors and patterns might not be good for them, they stayed in those rooms, and then they would move into these colored rooms. And it's really important these rooms are like home, because some children are there for months and months and months with their parents. So if you go to the next one, this is the next slide. So these are the actual rooms, and they now have striped curtains as well. And I think you press it, it goes on to more pictures. And they've been open for about a year now, and the children are getting better quicker. So that does make a difference. And it's not about what I've done, it's about the whole place, and it's about making the nurses and doctors feel happier, or everybody working there feel happier, you know, and then you get better quicker. Next, please. And last year, and this is my really, it hasn't been able to happen this year, which is understandable, but I worked with Method and did a limited edition range for them. And originally I wanted to do it with workshops with Sheffield's patients, but they ran out of time, and they said to me, Morag, you know, will you do the design? And I said yes, but I said in return I would like you to be able to support the project I'm doing. Next, please. So there was this courtyard that they'd run out of money, the NHS, to make this garden happen. And so I said to Method, will you give me the money to transform this garden? And they said, yes, I don't take any money from it. I would just use all the money on the project. And they said, yes. And if you go to the next slide, next image, this is how it's going to turn out. Quite a contrast. So this is the actual SketchUp of the pavilion. And then we've got pavements, and we've got planting. And so it's just really, really amazing to be able to make that happen in this time as well. And hopefully it will be the end, it will be in a few months. We'll be able to do it by the end of the year. Next, please. So I'm just going to end on, I did call this slide original, Our New Now, because I think that obviously we've all been through exactly the same situation, and people get through it in a different way. And I found it very, very difficult to think about things, new things. It didn't feel right. So I felt like I had to just get going on stuff. So I started transforming my house, because I realized that even though I found the place I wanted, I'd sort of had lost about who I was and what I loved anymore, and my house was a bit run down. And so I thought I've got to give my house back some love. So I started doing all these projects in my house. So this is the roof terrace. Next, please. Next, please. We'll go past that one. This is the library that was on the left or on your right, whichever way. It was like that for 3 years, just full of my books. And now we built the library. Next, please. Next, please. Just showing you and in the meantime, during this time though, Laura Wellington from In Good Company got in touch with me, the most amazing, like powerful girl. She's brilliant. And she got in touch with me and she said, Moy, we've got these billboards. Would you like to do a piece of artwork that says thank you to our frontline workers? And I thought, I really want to do something. You know, if there's something I could do, it's brilliant. So I did this piece. I struggled we didn't have much time actually. She didn't give me a lot of time, but for the 2 days that I did have, I was really struggled over the words, and I really wanted to do something that came from us, you know, that said, our superheroes, we love you. And in my presentation, I put a picture of all the rainbow, because I felt I was feeling that everybody was wanting to tell everybody in the streets how they felt, but they were inside their houses and all the streets things had disappeared. So to be able to put something big in the streets in this time that people who were going to work and the rest of us were inside, to give them some color, felt really, really important. And so we did this hoarding. And then next, please. And also, Laura had lined up a lot of other artists to get involved. And then it grew, and we did, she got it all throughout Leeds with all the messages from the different artists saying thank you. And Laura, you can look at all her In Good Company website, because there's all the thoughts from people. And if we go to the next one. And then I did a drawing one so people could colour it in. I think this girl is amazing colouring. It's fabulous. I'm really envious of how well she coloured that in. Next, please. And the patience. And then this was the most fantastic thing, because Laura took it to the people. Sorry, I've just lost the people's posters for the people. Posted for the People project, where she made banners, and then people paid £20 and the money, and then any profits went to charity, and then people could put these all out in their houses, all the artists they could choose from. And then there were just this amazing series of Instagram messages of people buying the posters and being involved. And then Laura did a street, the best community street and everything, and it's been an amazing, and I feel very thankful to have been involved, that I could actually do something physically in this time. And if we go to the next one. And then these guys are amazing, Wood Street Wars, and they got they said, they got on to Laura, did they want anything down in London? And I've got this wall on my house, and so they painted our wall and I painted with them. We had to keep a distance, obviously. And then also you and I did have it in my other presentation, put our placard, our big superheroes up in Mayfield, and then down in Finsbury Park, which is where I come from. So it was really brilliant. Next, please. But that's my building, so you can see the piece. And what I wanted to say about that is painting in the street. It was really incredible. The estate at the back, everybody came up to me and telling me how they loved the colour, and they said, thank you. The postman came up to me and said, don't ever take that down. Always keep it up forever. And I was really nervous, because it is really, really bright. And I was really worried that the people in the street might not like it. And they absolutely loved it. And it brought us all together, and we talked a lot more, and it was great. And it really strengthened the small amount of people who live in the street. Next, please. And there was even a beer by North Brewery, who made the beer with the In Good Company. It's an In Good Company beer, and that's the money's going to charity, to Blurt and Mind, and that sold really well. Next, please. And then this was a piece. I've always wanted to do a piece with the word together, and in Australia, if you press it, it goes. I was given this big, massive car park, and it was about communities coming together in Fremantle, and I just wanted to do this big piece on here, because the word together, and obviously this was just finished just before the end, just before lockdown, and then the word together is so poignant now. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah, and if you press it again, it takes you round. And it was just positioning, it was just changing the dynamic of what is a car park's a car park, isn't it? I mean, it's quite austere. And changing what it was saying to the community, what that physical space was doing. And yeah, so that's it. Sorry, sorry, thank you.
Thanks so much, Morag. I've got a number of questions here. I think
okay.
What I will...
do you want me to come on now? Do you want to try and see me now?
I'll stop sharing, and then...
okay.
So what...
Christine's done that.
Welcome back. Nice to see you again, Morag. Let's try this, and if for some reason you freeze, we'll let you know, and you can turn your video off.
Okay.
Lots of positive comments on the chat about how much they're enjoying the work. I think there are a few questions here around how to engage best with perhaps groups that are less well represented. So there's a question around how do you work when it's a very diverse community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and children? Do you have any sense of that? And then a second question, I'll just link to that. There's a question here about communities that maybe, have you ever walked away from somewhere where the community didn't want it or the response was challenging? So I think somebody's looking for some advice about that as well.
Okay.
So connecting with diverse communities and community challenges, I guess.
Well, I think when you work with every community, and you've got to go in totally not with preconceived ideas, with an open mind, to understand, to listen, and to engage with the people, to then understand the best way to approach how to work with different communities. It's not about you telling people things, it's about you learning first. So it's quite, there's different ways to start. Maybe don't just go in and go, we're going to do this. You have to sit and find the best way. So for example, with the community over at Ditchling, what was actually really lovely for those people is they were taken out of their environment and they were taken to Ditchling. Everybody was given food and tea and looked after really well, and they had it as a day out, and they were really excited by it, and it made it that made them more engaged because they felt that they had been looked after as well. And sometimes you have to, what is quite good is to introduce yourself, and then you let people introduce themselves to you. You don't just go, oh, here's me, blah, 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 and then we're going to do this, blah, 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 blah. You've got to go, okay, so tell us about you. Tell us about what you want to do and what your thoughts are. And then you have to actually work on the spot. I get criticized, I think, because I don't always come with a plan, like planned, or maybe I criticize myself because I think maybe I should come with a plan or something like that. But I think that I don't know everything about everything and everybody and every different culture. And so you have to respond to the environment you're in. And when I was working in Stew Garden Estate, I mean, those little kids were very, very suspicious of me, and they wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't look directly at me. And I had to be very, very careful and very respectful and gentle to gain their trust, to get them to understand. And don't even know if they knew. It wasn't until the end that they really knew what I was trying to do with them. But in the end, they did know what I was trying to do with them, but that doesn't matter, because as long as on the way they enjoy it. And if I feel that I might not be the right person to do that, so to make certain connections, I will work with a poet, I'll work with somebody else or somebody embedded in the community who will make those connections. So up in Aberdeen, it was Jo the poet, she was there, even though I am Scottish, I come from London, that it doesn't really, that's a big difference. And so I think you've got to be so careful, and you've got to be so respectful, and you've got to learn and not think you know everything, because you don't know anything. What was the other question? The other one was, like I'm on that government thing where they put 5 questions in and I've got to remember.
I think you answered about working with community groups. Oh, I guess about, is there, about listening? I mean, I think that was your response to. And I guess children is maybe you haven't, but you kind of said, it's about listening, it's about letting them lead, and it's about community partnerships. There's a question here about funding, which might be a good one for you and Martin to talk about together, and program. So how does the funding work? And are you involved in the programming of your spaces? And how does that work as well?
Okay.
To answer that, do you want to start?
Well, I'll talk about the funding of things like the festival or something. So what would happen on festivals and various things, there will be a budget. And I always think it's really important to know, rather than me spending ages trying to work out how much something's going to cost, it's better to tell me if you've got no money, then I can work out whether it's possible to, what we can do with it, you know. So there's often situations where the ambition is bigger than the money that's possible. But I don't believe that's something that should stop you, because I think that you can make lots of things happen if it's, you know, you can try and get money, you can try and get paints given to you, or you can get it from places, you know. And a lot of the thing is, when we're building stuff, is the human manpower, you know, the person power, people painting, people doing things. That can, if you do that as a normal contract, that can cost huge amounts of money. You know, you can get reclaimed materials, you know, there's lots and lots of things. So every budget is different. But even if you don't have a big budget, you can do quite ambitious stuff. So I don't work, I will, if I want to do the job enough, I will find a way and try and make it happen. If I think the job will make such a big difference to that community, I will find a way of making that happen if I can. So far I haven't failed, but if I can.
In terms of programming, if you want to answer that one first, Morag, and then we'll go, do you work on, so for example, the bandstand or some of the other activations?
I tend not, I mean, I like being involved and knowing what it is, but the whole idea of my work is that my work is given, you know, that piece of work was made when it's made with other people. That piece of work is made with other people. It is their work to do what they want with it, without me supervising what should go on it or whatever. If I was asked to do a project that was about, in a different context where I was doing a performance and a thing, that's a slightly different thing. But with the community projects, I think it's like, here now, it's about how you want to use your bandstand, how you want to do things. If you want to use it as a dining table, that's fine with me, you know. And I don't want to be judgmental. I don't want to tell people how to do things as such. And so in the one in Aberdeen, it was lots of poetry and spoken word. And when, you know, people say to me, are you happy with that? And I'm like, that's brilliant, because I love the spaces being activated. They're meant to be.
Martin, do you want to pick up on funding and programming? And there's a few questions too around just in terms of costs. And
well, it's slightly different for me because in my work with Morag, we're a commercial property developer, and therefore my work with Morag has pretty much always been commission, you know, a commercial commission-based work, rather than the other projects that Morag talked about for the NHS and with charity and community arts organisations, where it's probably a little tougher to raise money to do things. You know, I have very supportive colleagues, and one particular, Richard Upton, who's owned the company that I worked for a very long time, where Morag and I met, well, before that, in fact. And to have very supportive colleagues who are happy to step outside of the normal process of development and imagine that working with somebody like Morag on a project like these that we've done together numerous times adds something significant to our development process. You know, we're in the business of making places, and in order to make places, you have to understand and engage with the people who are living around and in them currently, and who are going to live in and around them in the future. And you need help to be able to do that at that early stage, because the thing about property development at its early stages, there isn't anything. You know, we just have empty, unused land. And if you want to talk to people, you can't just stand outside the gate and hope someone will talk to you. You have to do something, and that something has to be engaging. And so our work is always seen as a very, very key and crucial and important part of our development process. It's not extra to, it's not added to, it is a stage one, typically, of a multi-stage development process from which we learn, from which we engage. The train carriage cafe that Morag briefly mentioned at the beginning of her talk, which was one of the first projects that we worked on together in Deptford in South East London. That project was meant to be up and running for a year or 18 months, and it ended up being there for how long, Morag? 5 or 6 years? I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
long, really long time.
It straddled the recession, and so our project was delayed, and so happily that lovely thing got to stay there. So we consider that in that project that we had the longest public consultation exercise ever in the lead up to a planning application, because we were able to spend 5 or 6 years embedding ourselves in the community and understanding it better because of that work. And therefore for us, the investment in being able to do that is a part of the investment that we find to make our projects better. In programming, it's about understanding that as we ourselves don't have the expertise to create those projects that we ask Morag to help us with, neither do we have, either of us, I think Morag would not disagree with me, either of us have the expertise to curate and program them either. And so typically those projects are collaborative projects between my company, my colleagues, Morag, and a third partner who runs, operates or curates. And in Deptford and in Greenwich, the project that Morag showed, we worked with a local cooperative group called the Greenwich Community Development Association, who run cafes and food-related projects in Greenwich, and they ran the cafe and programmed it. And so it's always a collaboration of a group of people, and we try to find in operators people who are on the ground in the community, who understand that community and are able to add something significant to us who understand the community less because we are newcomers or incomers.
I guess that kind of brings in, there's a question here around, are these interventions always positive, and a sense about, there has been more talk about the relationship between some of these, meanwhile, or art installations and gentrification or art washing, some people call it. So I think perhaps responding to that, I mean, where is the line, and how do you navigate that territory?
If you create those projects as art installations for people to come from far and wide to see, who are not of that community, there is a small element of benefit in that, but that's not what they're for. Those projects are there to engage with the existing community and those who are going to come and create the future of that community. And if they don't achieve that, they don't work. And so that is always a very strong part of the brief. And that's why the way that Morag works and has developed through her projects and the projects that she's done with my company are always about engaging and understanding and learning, and then developing the project from that engaging and learning and understanding process. Otherwise you'll fail. So it's exactly the opposite of that. And I would argue that very strongly, that it has to be about engagement with the place. You can't land a spaceship in a place that is not of that place, that has got nothing to do with it, that came from somewhere else and is for some people from somewhere else, just happens to be there, and the people who are around need to get out of the way. Can never happen. That cannot be how those things work. It just is, that will just fail instantly, and there's no point in doing it. So it's quite the opposite of art washing or landing some alien thing in the center of a community. It's not how it is.
Morag, did you want to respond to that too? I mean, is that something that you're ever concerned about, or is it just the participatory nature of the work is not always visible on the end product?
Is not visible.
Well, I guess, well, is it or isn't it? I guess, is that, yeah.
I mean, I think Martin said everything really, because there's, it is about different projects for different things, and some do come in but then they go away, and and so that's just actually an experience for people as well. But I think the ones that are really embedded in the community, and the community have been part of making it, I can't see that is gentrification when the community are part of actually being involved in the thing and it's theirs.
There's a couple of questions here around what happens to the work. And I know that lots, as you've talked about some of the traveling one, but I know lots of your work has ended up in schools and in community, and they're talking about the kind of permanence. It might be good to hear from you about that thought of legacy from some of these projects that are temporary.
Yeah, well, actually behind me is an S that was made for Finsbury Park that was never used, so I've got that, but you know, that was made for a thing that sadly, anyway. But okay, so what I do at the beginning of a temporary project, if it is a very short temporary project, I talk to the people at the very beginning of it, is what will happen to it at the end before we start, to say, okay, if we use scaffolding, we know what's going to happen to that. That's absolutely fine. That goes back and is reused. But if we use panels, where are those panels going to go? We need to put in place from the very beginning where it will end up, because it never ever works at the end. Because with the bandstands, there were lots of ideas that people wanted to put it here, there and everywhere, and then, but it wasn't organized, and the placards went to each of the community groups and they've got them up in their communities, but the main part of the bandstand had nowhere to go. And I just said, okay, it's coming to me then. And I've got it. And I've been reusing it. And I've got 2 storage, because the biggest one that I was the most traumatized by, but I totally understood why, was the Temple of Agape. When we made that, after the period of time it was there for 3 months or something, it was absolutely just going to be thrown away because nobody had any space to put it anywhere. And I was like, there is no way that can happen. It took us, you know, it's all painted. So that, again, also I have in the storage space, which I will reuse, you know. So, but so because of those incidences, and I can't get any more storage space because it costs me too much money, I now say at the beginning. So when I did a big project in Cape Town, it was up for 3 days. It used a lot of materials. I was like, there's no way here that we can throw this away. So then there was this amazing group called Seesaw Do, who worked with all the townships and the communities. They took all the materials, all the wood, all the printed wood. They just covered buildings with them. They put them into libraries. They made tables out of them. They made furniture out of them. I never got involved. They could do whatever they wanted with them, and they used all the materials and brought some joy, a different type of thing. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. And I often show those. I would have shown it today, but I didn't show that project. And so I think it is absolutely key. I am doing more permanent projects, but what exactly does permanent mean? Anyway, it's a bit of a weird one. But I am very, you know, and I use water-based paints, you know, I don't use sprays, you know, there's lots of things and I know I could do better. I know I often use too many trays and I'm trying to change that. So I think it's all the time in your head thinking about, if I'm making this, what am I going to leave behind? And I shouldn't leave anything behind. So how can I, you know, minimize that as much as I possibly can, sort of thing. And that's what I have in my head.
The last question that I have, which has come up in a few different questions, are all pertaining to color. So some about how, you know, are you rehabilitating color because it's not really present in the city? Also, you know, is that just because the British don't really like color? It seems to be more welcome in sunnier, hotter places. Does it look better in hotter places? And then also the psychology of color. So how do you choose them? So perhaps, I mean, color is so central to your work. So maybe just a bit on color before we close.
Okay. So I definitely have color embedded in me. I think it was definitely from my mother, who's a textile artist. And when we were very little, I was introduced to, she used to dye fabrics with onions, wool and things with onions and berries. And I knew the difference between a yellow that was made from an oniony color, you know, that was a bit more earthy, to a chemically made yellow, to, you know, so so for me, color has been just in me. And when I went to St. Martin's and I did graphics, at that time, only anybody knew red, yellow, blue, the primary colors. And I already wanted to use complementary colors, and that was not popular at the time, but I still did it. So I've always loved color. I do think you've got to be very, very careful with color. I do think, so for example, on my terrace at the moment, I have put all the colors, and because the sun's been amazing, you can absolutely see why if you're in a country with sun all the time, like Spain and various other countries, if you have a blue building in a blue ultramarine, and when the sun shines on it, it is iridescent, it is beautiful. If you have a blue in a northern light, it is very, very different. So you do have to be very, very careful. And I mainly paint on wood as well, because, and I'm very specific about it being paint and the depth of the paint, because the more layers you put in, the deeper the color is. And even if you don't realize it, that color penetrates into your eyes more than if you only coat it with one color and things, if you paint more deeply. So I think that, I don't know, in 1990, I did a hoard, or was it 93? Anyway, so I did a hoarding with Orford Hall Monaghan Morris, and in the papers they said that it was too colourful for London and it had to be pulled down. So I have been trying to that was 1993, so that was quite a long time ago. I've been trying to colour the city for a very long time, but how I see it, so this is how I see it. I really love plants and I really love flowers, and I really see when we do like these temporary projects, so I love geraniums. I even put some geraniums are so phenomenally beautiful, bright colors. And when the light shines on, well, any colored flowers, they're just so amazing. And I sort of see the work. So when people say, oh, color is artificial, or color is this, or color is for children, it's like, no, look in your gardens. Color is just growing there. And so when I work in like a big gray car park or something, I always think it's like these little flowers are all coming up, and they're coming up for a period of time, and they're brightening up the place, and then they go away again and they come back again. So I do see color in nature and color in things, and I think that, so it's a natural thing. And I think that we need to I think you need to be careful how you use it, but I think you should use it as much as you can, because it does make you, just from the reaction of the people in the street when I painted that wall, and they were saying, we just need color here, we just love the color. And I was like, wow, that, that's great. And it's good to talk with people about it as well, about their response to color. I think it was interesting when I was in India recently. I was in India just at the beginning of the year, and a lot of people, worry. They were saying to me, oh, color is for festivals and colors for this, and if you're serious, we need, they're going towards more neutral colors. And I was like going, no, you've got an amazing culture of color, just embrace it and use your color because you own it. Don't worry, don't think that it's more sophisticated to be gray. So but at the same time, I have a grey bedroom, a completely dark grey bedroom, because once I had a red bedroom, and that was absolutely hideous, because it made me feel like I was inside my own body. But in a grey bedroom, we had a problem with light and stuff, and I completely turned this room with grey curtains, dark grey, everything is grey, and it is the most amazing, calm space to sleep in. So I think it's also about usage of color. If you had a completely yellow room, I don't think I could sleep in a completely yellow room, but if you have a room with a bit of yellow in it, it's a different experience, So it's how you use colors, the percentages you use colors, the light. You should always test your colors where you're going to make it, and you should never choose colors off screen. Never, ever. Always test your colors. It will never be the same. If you just go, oh yeah, that, and you think you're going to get it out in paints, it won't be the same.
hugely inspiring talk, Morag. I know there's lots of people saying, please come to my town, and how they're going to take this into their public realm discussions in Bristol, and people from Barbados saying how depressed they were when they moved to the UK, and more color, please. So, so thank you for inspiring everybody and brightening up our homes today. So yeah, and thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Christine. Good job. All right. Thank you, Morag.